Hello and welcome to Man's Model Moments. I am not on camera this evening because I've had a very lazy weekend. So I'm not really in a fit state to be captured and shock you with my unkemptness on a Sunday evening. So you're not here to see me anyway, you're here to see the hunter, which as you can see is still here. Let's move this along a little. There we go. I have done a couple of things to this. As you can see here, this is a little light coloration there. That is because I just put a little bit of, if I can find it, this magical substance, Mr. Surfacer 500, which you can basically just put on. I just used a little combination of a pointed cotton bud and one of these little micro applicators just to get it into that little gap. So there's some tiny gaps just in this front bit of the intakes, just along pieces of this seam. So you can see here, I haven't properly sprayed this, so you can still see it. So just putting it in with a bit of a micro applicator and then just using a pointed cotton bud just to smooth it along just fills it. It means you don't have to do a lot of sanding. And you can see here I've also tidied up these pieces. Also, the worst fitting area of this kit by far, and it is not a bad area, right? It is just indicative of actually how good a kit it is. This seam here, just on the end of this piece of the vertical stabilizer, that just needed a bit of trimming and filling, but nothing untoward, nothing that is abnormal. It's just because the fit, one of the things I find with the fit of recent Airfix kits, and it goes to a similar kind of proposition to, you know, decent Tamiya kits and stuff, is when they're as good as they are, when you do get small discrepancies, they're more noticeable. Again, go back to, well, the very first cast, I think, of this build series. Your eye is naturally drawn to those small things. You know, we notice things in order of how big they are. If there's a massive error, your eyes will be drawn to that, and you won't notice the small things as much. If there aren't any big errors, then your eye will pick up on the smaller errors. So it's one of the things that we are good at. And it was just because everything else is good, my eye was being drawn to those little bits. So I thought, again, you don't need to see me filling and sanding a little bit. Not that I actually did. I did a quick wipe over just to take any edges off. I actually did it this morning when I was my regular D&D campaign game. So it's not like it took any effort. And we have a nice base to be able to do our actual painting this evening. So I'm not going to dwell much more on that. Actually, you can see here where I've done the fuel tank. So this is just actually where I put the Mr. Surfacer 500 on. And this is in Blue Peter style, one I prepared earlier. So that's been sanded and just primed. So I thought I'd do one, because once I've done one, you know, it's the same for the others. You're not going to see anything different. So I don't see the point really in boring you with repetition. Sorry, I'm just knocking my microphone here. Apologies if that comes up. So let's see, who do we have in the chat this evening? Go for it painting, World War II scale models, Richard Brace, Aaron Nichols, Wayne Model Builder, I Love Great Tits. I love great tits as well, and bearded tits, and blue tits, and all the other little birds. So Welcome all. Welcome to those of you who haven't yet commented in the chat. There are a fair few of you who I haven't mentioned, who haven't yet commented, but welcome all. And yes, models and D&D. I am an uber nerd. I also do 3D printing and all kinds of other stuff. So yeah, I'm as geeky as they get, really. With the exception that I do shower every day, and I am not that kind of gamer. Just to further the stereotype, I have put the compressor on before I started, so we have even had some prep for this session. So unlike the others where we've been doing very much seat of your pants modeling, this has a tiny bit of prep. I'll say a tiny bit because I don't want to lull you into false sense of thinking that there's actually some sort of plan here. So the first thing I'm going to do, so obviously I have got a nice primed model. I usually prime with automotive spray primer. The reason being is you have to be selective, right? Don't go buying dollar spray cans from Hobby Lobby or Poundland or something, because generally you wouldn't use them on your car, right? So I wouldn't use them on a model. But things like what I use is Autotech. These are a pretty good brand. I know other modelers use this. It's got high covering power. That doesn't mean it's going to fill all of your panel lines. As you can, well, hopefully you can see here. Yeah, I think you can from the stream. All of the panel lines are preserved. As I mentioned last time, car pigments, decent car pigments, are very finely milled. Because otherwise people would complain about the very expensive cars looking shit when you buy their paint to repair your dent and scratch. So I usually prime with automotive primer because it has better, if you like, bite into the plastic, because they tend to be, they're not water-based acrylics. They're just going to not have the same tooth, if you like. So provide a really good solid base. Now, if I'm going to be doing things like chipping, on a worn aircraft or stuff, it's not something I'm going to do with this Hunter, because you don't see an awful lot of really beat up Hunters from period photographs in service. I'm sure there were them. It's not a particular feature of the aircraft that I know of. I stand to be corrected, but it's not like a Japanese Zero, for instance. I would actually base coat in aluminium, whatever the aircraft was, or duraluminum, something that represents the alloy that it was made of, and then probably apply a coat of chipping fluid, whether that be hairspray or actual chipping fluid, before I then apply the camouflage coat so I can do some easy, chipping weathering. That's if you're going to be doing big scale stuff, stuff that is really weathered. For doing small weathering, there's another YouTuber, I can't remember, he does models. He's really, really, really good at weathering. But as he said, he doesn't do any paint chipping now, principally because it's much easier to control actually painting chipping on. And you can get just as or a better realistic effect doing that than you can with paint chipping. I think slightly different on the aircraft like Zeros or very weathered stuff, or if you're doing old knackered things. I think paint chipping actually looks really good on those kinds of things. Heavily weathered Pacific theater aircraft, I think, always look good like that. So anyway, that's why I prime with automated primer. I tend to use grey on aircraft, and that's principally because I then do pre-shading, which is the first step I'm going to start with tonight. Now, for AFVs, I will prime in black. And the reason I prime in black, that's a difficult sentence to say after a couple of cocktails. The reason I prime in black is because I will then build up the light tones over that, leaving the shadows in the darker shade. So it actually, the dark base coat helps you build up those. And there's lots more crevices and things lots more areas of shadow on a tank sitting, somewhere than there is in an aircraft. So in an aircraft, you're mainly seeing, these big open surfaces. An AFV, you've got all these wheels which are shaded by the mud guards and stuff. Much easier to build up that effect from black. And generally, you don't have bright finishes on tanks, so it doesn't matter that the black is actually going to pull down the tone and saturation of your top colors, because that's actually something that you can use to your advantage. Halfway through doing the Lancaster okay, this is a good question to put up from Anthony Wilson. What I would say, and we actually talked about this on Airfix and Chill a couple of weeks ago. Do have a copy of that on the channel. You can go back and look at that, about how to get your mojo back. Different people have different ways of doing it. I usually find if I take a break from that and do something completely different. So if I was doing the Lancaster from 617 Squadron, I would probably go and build an AFV or a spaceship or something like that, something frivolous, something that I could get completed quickly. So like a starter set, something like that. It's one of the reasons I really like the 1 hour challenges, the starter set challenges I do on the channel, because they are a bit of a palate cleanser. They do get you out of your normal stuff. I think anything that you can do quickly that gives you a finished result could kind of build up that passion for modeling, because you get to see something finished. I think the problem with any big long-term project is it's gradual, and you're seeing small things, and you don't want to mess it up, so you're taking everything at a certain pace. Just get the Airfix Sherman starter set, or not even a starter set. Just get the actual kit. I say the starter set because actually I think they're about the same price. I know I sell them in the shop for the same price, and you get a decent paintbrush and some glue to use to make sprue goo with. The paints, you just put away somewhere. But just do that. You can do that in one sitting. You can build it in an hour. As I've seen, I've shown on the channel, you can build and paint it in an hour, but you don't have to put yourself through that kind of stress. But just have fun with something. I always find that if you're stuck in a rut, breaking out of whatever genre you're in, if you're doing AFVs, just do a little aircraft. Do a 144 scale fast jet or something. Something that really snaps you out of it. Do a Revell easy click snow speeder. That you could really go to town with weathering on. Something like that. And you can do that again in a day, in a couple of sessions. So yeah, I think getting your mojo back, I think it's something that we all struggle with from time to time. I started the YouTube channel to really make myself finish projects. That was one of the reasons that I started it. It wasn't because I desired internet fame or wanted to get 1 million subscribers or anything. All those things would be nice, in a kind of ethereal kind of thing. They're not a driver. It's not why I did it. And let's face it, the chances of any of those things are remote, if at all possible. But it was just something that I thought, if other people are watching me do things like this, I didn't imagine doing live builds, but if people are expecting to see something, then I'm more likely to finish it rather than just say, I'll just start something else, because I've lost my mojo with that. So there are all kinds of different ways. I don't, again, like I've said with a lot of modeling, I don't think there is a specific thing, a specific answer. I think it's just whatever works for you. But that's what I would try. And I know quite a few other modelers have said the same thing about just mixing it up a little bit, just trying something a bit different, breaking your kind of the rut, just gets you out of that. So, Eyeball Paul, This, unfortunately, is again one of my downfalls, and one of the reasons I started the channel is because I have more than a few projects on the go at a time. So for me, it's actually more a pitfall, that one, than a way out. But again, as I say, different things work for different people. I am notoriously bad at finishing projects rather than starting them, because I get excited about, get new ideas. I want to, see that through. But if it doesn't happen in a reasonable amount of time, then you think, oh, well, I'll come back to it when I, feel more like it. And then maybe that time never comes. So I said there was some prep done tonight. The one bit of prep I can't find is the black that I want. See, I've got Liquitex Carbon Black, which I could use, but probably won't. I'm trying to find my Tamiya. And let's check. We got the sexy gogs. Always have to have the sexy gogs. That is my XF1 Black. Although it's labeled XF1 Black, it's actually a bit of a mix. There's XF1 and X1 in there. I think maybe some of the semi-gloss black as well. So it's not quite pure, but it's pure Tamiya. So oh, now that's a point. Do I have? Don't think I have my alcohol here. Oh well. Looks like I'm going to be chancing Tamiya with the Ultimate Airbrush Thinner. Let's see how we get on. So has everybody had a good weekend? Any wondrous things been happening? People, any interesting kit purchases or interesting modeling happenings? I watched Moss's purchase of the Airfix Mega Tank Bundle. He posted that review up earlier tonight. I'm not convinced. I'm glad he did the review because it means I don't have to consider it. You get 28 kits, I think, for £250, I think. It's not cheap. They're all 1/72, 1/76 scale. They are mostly vintage classics, I think. You get 4 pieces of terrain, 2 of the European stairs, 2 of the Polish bank, which were recently, if you recall, on the outlet sale at really cheap prices. And their RRP is like £35.99 and £24.49 each. So that's over £120 worth of RRP there. So taking those out, I'm not sure really what I would consider particularly wonderful value in that set. But of course, everybody, each to their own. Some may enjoy that mix of models. I just find the Airfix mystery bundles and such are, yeah, you might save some money on RRP, but that's money you probably wouldn't have spent on those models, right? Because, I mean, I got the 12 Days of Christmas. And it had things like the 1/72 Seeking, which I wouldn't normally have bought. It's got the 1/72 Phantom, which again I wouldn't normally have bought. So it's got a lot of things which I wouldn't normally have bought. So it's like, well, if I just bought the models I wanted as an Airfix Club member, I'd have actually saved a lot more money. So Okay, let's get on with doing some pre-shading. So generally, I will start pre-shading on the underside because I need to test. I think my pressure's too high. I need to test things like that, things like the pressure, things like the paint consistency, and I don't really want to do that on the areas that are going to be most visible. I want to do that where people can't see. Yes. Yeah, still too. Where should I put the paintbrush? Yeah, I really wish I had the alcohol. I mean, the Ultimate Airbrush Thinner is good, but Tamiya is quite particular. In fact, interesting point about Tamiya paint, if you actually look at it, it is the lowest percentage composition of it is water. It's only about 30% water. Yeah, I think actually adding more thinners is going the opposite way. Because, of course, I'm adding water and detergent to something which is alcohol based. So I'm actually increasing the surface tension, not reducing it. So this might not go quite as expected. Now, I do have some Vallejo sort of tension adjuster fluid somewhere, but I can't see it. So let's just crack on and see how we go. I'm not going to do super precise pre-shading anyway, so you know I'm doing fairly broad lines here. Which is a nice safe way to do it, right? Broad strokes with a thin paint. If you make errors, they're not going to be particularly seen. I think that pressure is too high now. You see that? That's a very soft line. Yeah, because you can build up this effect, you know, by just doing more passes. You know, if you want a darker line, like so, it just takes longer, right? It's just you see how soft this one is, how soft and light it is compared to the other. Yeah, I'm mainly spraying thinner at the moment. Yeah, I'm on the verge of spidering here. But again, as I say, I'm not too worried about this. So proofreading for me is really it's a broad brush kind of effect. It's not what I'm relying on to produce most of the tonal variation in the model. Apologies, you can't actually see what I'm doing, so I'm having to angle it towards myself. This is where I think maybe a GoPro would be a good idea, because then you can get the same view as I do. Yeah, I'm not really happy with this. I think to me, I'm going to put to one side. And no, that's to me XF something or other. I don't really want to use that. Let's try the Liquitex. Just adding some Liquitex to that. It'll be the airbrush. In terms of the sound. Also, I tend not to speak when the airbrush is going because, you know, one, I'm concentrating. Two, then you hear the airbrush. So I do tend to pause when I am spraying. Let's try a little higher. Little higher. Not sure what PSI I'm at, probably about 12, 15. Morning, Luke. Welcome. Yeah, that's a bit better. So you can see, you can build up the effect as you wish. Yeah. But like, because I'm using quite dilute paint there, that started to spider there. I just wiped it, it goes away, right? You'll never see the issue there. Yeah, I am not particularly happy with that paint mix. Ugh. Just poured a load of paint over myself. Silly boy, Alex. Silly boy. Yeah. Also, I usually start in something like the wheel well here. So if I make any really horrific errors, if my paintbrush, that airbrush suddenly spurts, it's going to do it in there where it doesn't mess it. That's a much better mix. You see, that's a much more controlled, darker line. Yeah, look at the difference. So that is just changing the paint mix there. So I haven't done an airbrushing video. LPJ Models has done a really good airbrushing kind of tips and tricks. It's well worth checking out. Because you see, I am 1 to 2 centimeters away from the model there for doing fine work, and if I'm doing bigger work, it'll be about 4 to 5 centimeters away. So about an inch to 1 to 2 inches, depending on whether it's fine or broad work. And I think most people getting into airbrushing, just starting, are surprised at how close that is. But it doesn't matter how long you've been airbrushing, it does usually take a while if you're doing something different from your normal setup. Because I didn't have my alcohol there, I had to improvise a bit. So you've got to check what you're doing and just get the right consistency for what you want to do. Now, stuff around things like these ports, I'm going to be a lot more liberal. Occasionally, I'll give it a good blast as well, because sometimes it just helps to get rid of any crap on the tip of the brush. But yeah, as you can see, I don't really mind if I'm going a bit wiggly on these, because these aren't supposed to be exact, right? It's not an exact science, this at all. It's more to create a feel of what you want. Because it is exactly as described, pre-shading. It's, you know, creating shadows before you actually paint. You see there in those flaps, so I just wanted to create a nice area of deep dark shadow there. It's rapidly coming out. There we go. The other thing to do, of course, with this, which I sometimes forget and have to go back and do it again, is remember to pre-shade all the parts that you've taken and primed separately. So, for instance, for me, things like this fuel tank, um, more important for things that you're actually going to put on the model, like the speed brake and stuff. But it's very, very easy to forget any parts that are left off the model. I'm going to go get a bit faster than Luther. So normally, of course, this isn't the step that you really want to rush, because you want to make sure that you've got the effects that you want. But it is not the most interesting thing for a live stream. So I am expediting this somewhat. I'm going to be pretty sloppy on this underside bit, right? shows a couple of things, right? One, that you don't have to be super accurate with this stuff, and then secondly, I don't know what the second point was. I've lost it. Oh yeah. Secondly, if you make mistakes like this, where I put too much paint on, it's just started to spider there. One, you can just wipe it off. And two, does it actually make that much difference? Again, because we're using quite thin paint, we just ease off on the nozzle a bit. We can dry it out with the airbrush, then go back in with some more paint. Control that flow a bit better. And create more of an effect we want. It's also worth from time to time just making sure that your airbrush tip is not drying off. Nobody likes a dry tip. Right, let me just take a pause a bit, just have a look at the chat. That's an interesting question. Yes, I do. So there are a few reasons for this, right? Both. So first of all, you got to think, I am there by myself, right? Now there is a. It's not actually an official bus stop, but it's where a lot of kids get dropped off after school, like sort of, I don't know, 14, 15-year-olds. And if a great gaggle of those were to come into the shop and start messing about, not a lot I can do as just being there by myself. And yeah, security cameras and all that sort of stuff is great, but you don't really want to get into a situation where you have to use them, evidentially. Secondly is how much I am prepared to pay for liability insurance. If you work with it's like with anything, right? If you work with children and animals, it's more unpredictable. Of course, insurance companies don't like unpredictability. And so if you say that, if you're opening a kindergarten, for instance, your insurance premiums, I'm sure, are going to be hellishly more than if you are selling, I don't know, like I am, specifically to adult enthusiasts. So I have a whole bunch of chemicals in the shop, not just the glues and stuff, because I make sprue goo and cement and everything. So I have raw chemicals. So I have a kosh cupboard, which has, alcohol, ethyl acetate, acetone, white spirit, all these flammable and stuff, plus resin. You've got to think, I've got a 3D printer. So just in terms of overall risk, now that doesn't mean that I don't want to sell to up and coming modelers. Absolutely not. I absolutely encourage people to get into the hobby. But if you think about it, how many sort of 12 to 15-year-olds are going to go into a model shop by themselves to buy something? Modeling is not necessarily a cheap hobby. So there's that side of it as well. So either you open yourself up to all this, well, as insurers would say, risk for what return, or you just have them come in with their parents who, let's face it, are probably funding the thing anyway, and just make it much easier and cleaner for me. So at the moment, I would love to have staff that it would be no problem, and I could have all ages. I could do like a a workshop, like an after school workshop, get people introduced to modeling, all that kind of thing. But I can't do that by myself. Um, and there's just tons of rules and regulations, that I just would rather not get into. So part of it is practicality, part of it is risk, part of it is money, and part of it is me just being lazy. So yeah, I'm afraid, unfortunately, at the moment, as it stands at the moment, until I can employ other people to help out with the shop, which it's not even breaking even at the moment, so that'll be a while coming. Yeah, no unaccompanied under 16s. Accompanied, absolutely fine. I've had, well, literally dozens of people coming in with their kids, either to buy stuff for them or with them, or because dads with their I've got a couple of people who come in with their daughters who are obviously not interested at all in modeling. It's their dads who are there for the models, and they're just like, I don't want to go. So yeah, that's the stance at the moment. If it changes in future, of course, it'll the sticker will come off the door. I'd love to be able to do that, but at the moment, it's just not in scope. Hi, John Alec, and welcome. Hi, Mark. Hi, Hobby Time. Who else? Who I've missed? Hi, Bob Paul. I think I've already said hello, but hello again. I mean, there is the other thing. I mean, of course, if I lose one kit, if one kit gets stolen from the shop, right, not to say that kids would, but just to say, say I did, say somebody steals a £50 model kit, I've lost not only the investment in that kit, which is the majority of the cost. I can tell you, you don't make much margin on model kits, so I've lost that and the potential of selling it, right? So I've got to get in the stock and all that rest. So, again, it's easier to have a more mature audience, but yeah, the reality is it is a very different world today in terms of regulations and stuff. All for good reason. It's like a lot of things. You can understand why these things happened, but they don't necessarily make life easier for retailers or well, anybody really. But I mean, I had a young boy. I say young, I don't know what he was, like 12, 13 maybe. Him and his mum were looking in the shop at just past 5 o'clock. I was just leaving, and obviously the shop had been closed for a while, but I was just leaving. And this was on a Friday, and his mum was like, "What time do you open tomorrow?" I'm like, "I'm open from 10 till 6, And they were there, next morning at about 10 past 10. We're just like super keen, which is really nice to see, right? So I don't think that having a policy that you've got to be accompanied if you're under 16 is really going to put off a lot of kids at that age, because I recognize myself in that child. That's what I was like back in the well, it'd be the early 80s. And yeah, if I had to wait for my mum or dad, I mean, to be honest, I probably wouldn't have gone in the shop by myself anyway. But if I did have to wait for my mum and dad, that wouldn't have been a problem. And like I say, they would probably be funding the purchase anyway. Maybe I should just develop like a grumpy old man persona so that I'm, I'm seen as the crotchety old shop owner that you don't want to go near. At the moment, oh shit, I think Pablo does that anyway. Pablo might look small and cute. He's not friendly. He doesn't know you. Oh wow, that really doesn't help. So I'm going a bit fast and loose because I've been talking. I think my tip has dried out a little bit. Got a bit of spidering. Like Arkwright, indeed. I thought about that. Open all hours or open no hours. I actually did have a guy come into the shop, a young lad, about I say young lad, I mean full adult, but he was like, what, I don't know, 19, 20, asking if I had any jobs available. Which, fair play. I mean, he said it would be a dream job to work in a model shop, and I'd love to be able to be in a position to employ him, one, so that I didn't have to do it, and secondly, to be able to employ somebody who's looking for a job, especially one, somebody that goes out and actively looks for a job, rather than expecting it to come to them, which seems to be the way for, let's say, some of my children who are a similar age. I'll be fair, one of my children, and she's still at school. She's she's might be lazy. To be fair, my eldest daughter and my son. I mean, my son is in gainful employment. My eldest daughter is a very diligent worker. I don't know where she got it. Not from me. Definitely from my ex. I always say she got my intelligence and my ex's diligence, which is probably why she's now my ex. Probably didn't go that well. Still, hey ho, you live and learn. So as I say, I am trying to expedite this pre-shading process a bit because I don't think it's particularly interesting. But they also don't want to completely screw up the paint job. That's the point I was going to make earlier. I think doing the expedited process also shows that if you make small mistakes and stuff, it actually, at this stage, it's not the end of the world. You're going to do a lot more for the model. I mean, I've done really bad things to models at this stage, including spilling like the contents of this over it. Still recoverable. Not a big issue. Pressure down a bit. Ah, right. Just check the chat again. Which aircraft stand is that? That is a good question, John Alec. These are my stands. I sell them in the shop, or at least I have them in the shop. I don't think I've actually got any out yet. And they're not on the website yet, purely because I haven't had a chance. I've got over 200 kits to still put on the website, because it is just a real pain in the ass. And actually, after that, that chap came into the shop asking for a job, and he'd gone, and I realised he hadn't left any details, which is a bit of a, that's an error of inexperience, isn't it? I was thinking as I went home, actually, it'd be great if I could just have him in for a couple of hours a day, just listing stuff on the website. Because there's been a couple of things with the shop. So people coming in have been super supportive. Had some really nice people coming in, some really nice chats. But of course, whilst you are talking to people in the shop, and I mean like 30 or 40 minutes a customer, which I think is one of the value adds of a model shop, right? Is you don't get that from the internet, you don't get the advice. Had a guy coming in who wanted advice on Tamiya paints, which ones to get, and we went through, and compared different colors and stuff. And he bought what five Tamiya paints, which is, you don't make much on Tamiya paints. But he couldn't have got that from like just buying from Jadlam or whatever, right? Yeah, you could have gone to some forum or something, but I mean, he was, I don't want to slight him, but at least in his 60s, maybe a little bit more. Is he really going to do that? Rather than just go to the model shop and ask questions? But if you're wondering why the website is sparsely populated, spidering that. It is because I miscalculated how much time it would take, and customers. It's always the customer's fault. So these stands are actually 3D printed, which a lot of them are. If you look online, a lot of them are 3D printed. I'm just not going to charge the amount that they are for them. I think you'll regularly see 3D printed stands at like 25, 30 pounds. It's like, how do they justify that, really? If you have a 3D printer, it's super easy. There are loads of STLs that you can get. But obviously, I supply the main parts are 3D printed, but then you've got the all of the connection pieces. So, I mean, they're just standard, whatever they are, M5 bolts or whatever, with little, again, 3D printed little knurled heads that they just fit into, and then just the foam to to make it nice and non-slippery, because 3D printed parts are, I mean, they're plastic. Plastic on plastic is a bit slippery, which isn't what you want. You want it to stay where you want it, right? Ronnie Barker was a genius. Not so much the other one. So my grandfather always reminded me, both in looks and of character, of a mixture between Eric Morecambe and Ronnie Barker. He was always joking, very clever, dry sense of humor. Very clever guy, actually. He could count cards. Never play cards with my grandfather for money. He would take you to the cleaners whilst laughing and joking about it, which And he was always an incredibly kind and loving grandfather. And I was the first grandchild as well, so he did spoil me. I remember him buying me, I think it was a Christmas or birthday present, I can't remember which. Basically went down to the toy store in my home city, Lincoln, and basically just asked me what I wanted. Which I'm not sure he didn't realize, his generation. But for a small child, I mean, this was a fairly early memory of mine. I must have been only 6 or 7. I was just like, I didn't know what to ask for because we'd always been brought up that you don't ask for things, children should be seen and not heard, that kind of thing. And I remember asking if it would be all right if I could have this chemistry set, and it's like, if you want it, you can get it. And it's just like, okay. So yes, I got my Merit chemistry set. Complete with all kinds of things like copper sulfate and alum and I mean, can you imagine health and safety today allowing kids, pre-high school age kids, I mean, it happened in the 50s as well, right? 50s and 60s, conducting experiments with copper sulfate and I remember making ammonia and hydrogen gas and various acids. Of course, I'm also probably the last generation that I say, I'll come back a bit. My school, let's see if I'll get a picture of my school just to give you the flavor of what my school was like, and also just give me a bit of a break from airbrushing. So bear with me a second. Here we go. Let's look at images. Okay, here we go. No, come on, I want the image. I don't want this. I don't want to enroll. I think I'm a bit too late for that now. Open image, new tab. Jesus Christ. They're not making this easy. Right, let me share this screen with you guys. What the hell? I don't want to share slides. Share screen. There we go. Okay. So this was my school, right? Hopefully you guys can see that. Lincoln Christ Hospital School. Now, this is the old part of the school, as you can imagine. We didn't actually, you weren't allowed to come in this way. This is the way the teachers came in, and they parked on this gravel either side. We came in from the left-hand side. There's a courtyard through that way. And basically, you just had teachers. No running in the cloisters, boys. It had been an old boys public school, but it became comprehensive, and a lot of the school masters was still of the generation of the old boys public school, and still have that kind of mentality, including the head, Mr. Behenna, who couldn't operate. A PA was a modern piece of technology for him. So we had this PA system throughout the school, and the beeps would go off to the end of lessons and stuff. And he used to come onto the PA system, so he used to switch it on, and then he plugged the microphone in. So there was this horrible, sort of fumbling and screeching noise. Oh, it's Mr. Henna here. I don't know how old he was. He seemed like about 1,000,000 years old when I was there. But the old parts of the school, the chemistry labs were still in the old parts of the school. And they still had the old 1950s wooden benches. I think it actually predated those, probably went back to the 30s, those benches. So we had Bunsen burner gas ports. We had on the bench, right in the center of the bench where we had so we actually just had lessons at these benches, with the Bunsen burners and everything. There were bottles of, I'm talking like the ground glass bottles, bigger than this. So about, a little bit wider, a little bit taller than this, with ground glass tops, with the etched writing on the side to tell you what they were. So you'd have concentrated sulfuric acid, concentrated nitric acid, ammonia, sitting in these bottles. You think, oh my God, getting hold of sulfuric acid now is, reasonably difficult for good reason. It's fucking nasty stuff. He was just sitting there. I remember one of my, messing around. One of my mates, David Stevenson, when we must have been 15, poured. I had this bag which he hated. It was like this, and I hated it too. But it was like this rubber. I got it from an army surplus store. My mum got it for me, because at the time, a lot of my friends had army surplus, like backpacks, like the canvas ones. But instead of getting me that, she got me what she thought would be, my mum's interpretation of that, which was this rubberized canvas thing, like rubber on the inside, with these, and it just wasn't right. When you're 15, and it has to be what your friends have, not what your mum interprets. The worst thing. And my friend, you do horrible things to your friends, right? As that time, he poured concentrated sulfuric acid over my bag, right? And it's just like, he was like, and I was like, you bastard, it's like, and then he's like, no, it's fine. And then poured concentrated sodium hydroxide on it to neutralize it. So I put it in the sink and poured water on it and stuff, and it survived, right, immediately. And then over the next couple of weeks, it gradually disintegrated. As the combination of acid and hydroxide, gradually ate through what the organic fibers. The simpler times. I mean, I'm sure there are a lot of people that would say, yeah, that's why we don't have concentrated sulfuric acid in classrooms anymore. And to a certain extent, they're right. But I do think kind of lost something along the way, maybe. I mean, I have a healthy, not fear, but respect for sulfuric acid. And it is absolutely fantastic at cleaning drains, because, of course, it burns through organic material really well. Rifle Club. Yeah, wouldn't quite get that in the UK. Okay, so I've done most of the pre-shading, I think, underneath that I'm going to bother with. So let's crack on, see what we can get covered over here. Thing is, I do think you miss out on a lot. Like my children had never seen. There's an experiment that you can do with sulfuric acid and sugar. I don't know if any of you guys have ever seen this. Basically, if you get a Pyrex beaker, um, preferably an old one that you no longer want to ever use again, and just put about a quarter to a third of just normal sugar, just sucrose, standard stuff you buy in shops, in that beaker, and then pour on, I think it's about an equal volume of maybe a half volume of sulfuric acid, and then you just stand back, and nothing happens for a few minutes. And then basically, obviously, the sulfuric acid attacks the sucrose, breaks it down, and basically you get this, it grows and it turns black for a start, and then goes up and forms this basically snake of carbon, many, many times the volume. And it's a really, I mean, I remember it from school. So I managed to, of course, get a hold of some concentrated sulfuric acid and show my kids this. And they thought it was great, My wife, not so much. But, I think those kinds of experiments, I remember my chemistry teacher showing us the reaction of warm nitric acid, again, concentrated nitric acid, and sawdust. It just spontaneously combusts. It basically explodes. It's fantastic, and I've remembered that for almost 40 years, If I was ever in a situation in a, nitric acid factory, and there was a big container of sawdust, I'd be like, we better make sure in this fire that those two things don't come together. Whereas my son wouldn't have a clue what to do. And not just because he was an arts major. Yeah, I guess all of this came from that original question about the shop and under 16s, but our society has changed an awful lot. I mean, back in those days when I first got into modeling, my dad was into modeling. I mean, I'm thinking again of, I'm not even talking high school, I'm talking like 8 and 9. My dad used to park up in, whatever horrible 1970s car he had, and send me into the newsagent with a 50p piece to buy his cigarettes for him. And they would serve me, 20 Benson and Hedges. So sometimes I think we forget how much the world has changed culturally, within our lifetimes. It really is a very different world, very different views. Not that I want to get political, but I'm just saying it's very, very different. Some of those changes I think are good, some of them not so good. But I think that's the same for every generation, right? There are always change is the only constant. I think that's one of my favorite phrases. Now, again, I am somewhat doing a bit of a hack job on this pre-shading. So if you see spidering, if you see imprecision, you are quite correct. I think also I need to charge my airbrush compressor. Oh shit. So again, using quite dilute wet paint, it's not a big problem when I'm here. I am getting some spidering here, and I can just wipe that away. You know, it's not a big thing. But I think the moral of the story that I'm trying to tell with this airbrushing, apart from the fact is that I do need to change my charge my compressor. I've got the automatic thing switched off because it's hellishly loud. Is that, you know, if you haven't tried pre-shading with an airbrush, give it a go. The worst that can happen is it looks a mess. And if it's really that bad, just prime over it. You know, we're not putting down a lot of paint either with the primer or the pre-shade. Yeah, I need to charge my compressor. So please ask questions, because I'm going to switch my microphone off for a second whilst I switch my compressor on, because I don't want to deafen you all. Okay, so please ask some questions in the chat and I'll answer them as I can. Okay, I have surfaced from the waviness of that vibration. Yeah, I've never used a compressor whilst the webcam has been on. I never thought about quite how much it vibrates it. But there you go. That's interesting. That seems to have no effect. That probably means I need to clean the end of my airbrush. So good. That's a very good question. Generally, I try to. The reason I haven't tonight is I'm not quite sure where I've put it. You know, I said I was semi-prepared for this, not prepared. There we go, that's a lot better. Yeah, I think I probably got down to about 5 PSA spraying there. A bit high there, though. Yeah, so I have many times not done it and then spilt paint on. So if you were seen actually earlier, what I was doing is I was doing this, then I was moving the aircraft rather than my airbrush, right? So, I mean, they both have the same effect, right? But one carries zero risk of spilling the paint, whereas angling your airbrush all over the place, especially if you don't have the cap, comes with significant risk. A bulk order of stands. Yeah, I am starting to focus at the moment now, rather than getting more kits in. Because I've got some mini art kits in. John, I took your advice and got some mini art kits. I did look. I think it was a Panzer III, and I looked at the part count, and it was 1131. I was just like, holy crap! Over 1,000 parts. I was just like, wow. But yeah, I'm kind of looking at focusing more on the tools, accessories, things like sprays. I got in some sprays, some acrylic and some isobutane based aerosols. A Molotov, the chrome pens, which I swear by. Got some of those in. AK weathering pigments, because I think these are all the sorts of things that keep people coming in. Yes, people will buy kits, and that's kind of the main draw. But whilst you're there, as I do myself, I'm going to be looking at shit. There we go. I just talked about moving my paintbrush and spilling paint. I just did it on my hand. It's usually while I'm in a model shop, you do those value add sales. It's a bit like putting chocolates near the checkout in a supermarket, right? Oh, bloody hell. There we go. That is a perfect reason, Richard, why you should put the cap on your airbrush. Fortunately, I got away with that. I only spilt it over myself in the stand. But so normally if I'm pre-shading, I don't have as much paint in my airbrush as this. It's only because I had to change the mix and over dilute that Tammy to start with, because I didn't have my alcohol with me. Because it's at the shop. But yeah, it's a dangerous thing to do, spraying without your cap on. Going bareback, carries risks. Try not to do it. It's my advice. That is not enough pressure. Yeah, it's funny, John. A lot of people don't like AK. So, for instance, Moss, I think, won't touch them. And I think that's more because of what they did. They released it was a diorama book. With some scenes of people had modelled torture chambers and stuff from World War II. I wasn't actually involved actively involved in modelling during that, so I kind of missed it. And I think a lot of people didn't like the way that the company reacted, because it sort of didn't apologise, where a lot of people felt that they really should have done. Felt they were very insensitive and so on. That's not very nice. I can't quite get the pressure where I want it to be after changing that up. So, Flying Dutchman, explain to us, if you can, what the whole background was with the AK controversy. Because I say, I've never really looked into it in any detail. Okay, I'm playing pretty fast and loose now with this because I'm bored of it. Okay, let me just put that up on there. Yeah, I mean, they certainly made some, well, publicity, certainly. And they say all publicity is good publicity, but I'm not sure that was the case. I'm not sure it's the case in the 21st century. Things like cancel culture. This is not working for me in the way I want it to. The thing is, when you are used to doing a certain, spraying a certain paint a certain way, for a certain task, and then you change that, it can really throw you off your game, as I am adequately demonstrating here. You know, I'm used to using Tamiya paints for this, and this weird mixture of Tamiya Liquitex and Ultimate modeling products in there. It's not really cutting it for me. But hopefully I can show that even with suboptimal tools, you know, and trying to rush through something, you can still get a decent result, because pre-shading, all it's doing is helping the eye. This isn't where you end. This is the kind of start, your foundation. So, you know, we are not close to leaving this as our only kind of visual change in the model. Okay, I really am rushing through bits there. So, of course, on the top of the fuselage here, we're going to have camouflage anyway. So that's going to change a lot of what we see. Come on, Alex, what's wrong with this? Feels like the pressure is too high, but I'm really way down. Let's try it at almost nothing. No. It's like got a leak. No, I'm getting that is definitely too low pressure, because I'm getting too much paint coming out and not enough air. Just so the valve does not like that. It's better. Okay. Yeah, I think that was the issue, wasn't it? They what I find interesting, and a question that I don't know the answer to. By the way, what I'm doing here is, because I've got a bit more paint than I want, I'm just brushing it off in the direction of airflow. So I'm actually getting this sort of streaked effect out. So that's actually helping me, or hopefully helping me, in terms of visual interest for the overspray. So if you make mistakes and things, again, everybody makes mistakes. Everybody puts too much paint on or not enough or whatever. It's what you do with it afterwards and things like that. You know, rather than leaving it sort of spidering in odd directions, if you're doing it in the direction of airflow, then you're creating something which is actually working for you rather than against what you're trying to do. I do wonder a little bit on that point, though. You know, some modelers saw that okay, kind of making money out of the dioramas showing like suffering and like the exploitation of certain groups and stuff. I do wonder if it's a little bit, though, of feeling outraged on someone's behalf. I can't remember who the guy is, but there's a YouTube video I saw where a guy wears, I think he's just a standard US citizen, and he wore like a poncho and a Mexican hat. And in America, there were people coming up to him, just like ripping into him about how he couldn't wear that, about how it was awful, that he was culturally appropriating Mexican heritage. You know, just being really quite vile to him. And then he did the same thing in Mexico. And in Mexico, you know, one, nobody said anything. And when he went up to people and asked them, you know, what do you think of me wearing this? You know, they're just like, it looks quite good. Looks good on you. You know, you wear the hat well. It's just like, well, okay. I mean, it's not like he's trying to pass himself off. You know, this whole thing about cultural appropriation, I think, is a little bit odd. It's not like the black and white minstrels, right? It's not like you're caricaturing. I mean, if he had been doing some sort of skit on, you know, he was wearing that and then sleeping, you know, in the sun with like, you know, something to say he was working to imply that Mexicans are lazy or something. Yeah, that's a caricature, a racial stereotype, and that's pretty offensive. But he wasn't doing that. He was just wearing a Mexican sombrero and poncho. And it's like, well, it's like with people, like with the whole braids thing, which is ludicrous. But is it cultural appropriation or cultural appreciation? You know, generally, imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. So regardless of where braids come from, right, which is really from Northern European heritage, not from African American. The Indo-Europeans were doing it a long time. But anyway, aside from all of that, wherever it comes from, whether it's from Africa or Europe or Asia or wherever. Surely if somebody wants to braid their hair in that way, shows that they're looking at you and thinking, hey, that looks good. I would wish my hair would look like that too. So I'm going to do that. It's no different from seeing like somebody wearing a dress and thinking, you know, or a cool t-shirt or something, and saying, you know what? I'd like to wear that. That's cool. I don't know. Sorry, that was my automatic compressor pressure thing coming on. Yeah, no, as I was saying, I don't think it's offensive if you're doing it in that spirit, let's say. And I think with a lot of these things, it is the spirit of how these things is done is extremely important. You know, what is the intent? And you can't just go across and just say you can't do this as a blanket thing, right? Because that is, in its very essence, that's oppression. That's how things like fascism start. Same with comedy, right? There is, you should be allowed to be offensive, you know, and let people make the decision. Anywho, that's as much appreciated as I can do because I'm bored of it, and I'm sure you're bored of it, and I don't want to go any further. And that mix just isn't right. I can't spend any more time messing around with it. So let's sack that off, as they say. Let's give the airbrush a bit of a clean. And see if we can get some basic paint on this before we move on. So what do you guys think? Do you think it's cultural appropriation to do that kind of thing, to wear somebody else's national dress? I mean, the bizarre thing is that if you really think that, then what do you wear in America? You know, which is a nation of immigrants. You can't wear the national dress of your original country because you're no longer that. You know, you can't celebrate St. Patrick's Day when you say you're Irish American because you're not. You're no longer Irish, so that's cultural appropriation. You know, it's bullshit, right? Or do you think I am stuck in a past time and I should get with it? Let me know. Okay. This stand isn't really set up for painting this, but first thing I need to do before I do anything else is the air intakes and that exhaust. So I should have done that before I did all the pre-shading, but I forgot. Well, the thing is, Aaron, I mean, if you look into the history of most countries, all right, there's no purity. So I did my genetic testing a few years ago. I am wholly European. I am Northern European through and through. I have I think it's like a tiny percentage of French and a tiny percentage, like 0.01% of um, basically a black French colony, like in the 17th century or something, 16th or 17th century. So it's just like, it seems like, whatever French heritage I had, they seem to have had an affair with, one of their slaves or something. I don't know. But it just goes to show, in somebody like myself who is purely, Caucasian North European, I'm still genetically, have heritage which goes back to Africa, to different parts of Europe. Most of my genetic relatives from that are actually in the US. So we obviously went there at some point in history. So it's going to make lovely whistling sound. Just trying to give you the authentic hunter experience, you see. Lovely whistle of the engine. And if you look at the history of the UK itself, again, we are not a pure nation. We have been invaded probably more times and conquered than almost anywhere else on the planet. The Vikings had a go, the French, the Spanish, the Portuguese, everybody's come here sometimes. The Romans, we were a Roman colony for a long time. Does that give me a right to wear a toga? I don't know. Or should we just accept that we are all people? Just get on with each other. See, I always considered myself a liberal until I found out that my views in the last 5 years of what I thought was liberal is, which is basically mutual respect. In fact, today makes me a Nazi. Which is funny because my views haven't changed. It's just the political landscape is altered around me. So, Richard, I think so. Yeah, let's put that one up. I agree. I think American history is interesting. I think European history is interesting. I think people should spend a little bit more time understanding history and looking to the past, because those who don't, as many philosophers have said, are doomed to repeat the mistakes of the past. It does seem we are going down some of those routes. When I went to the States for the first time, and actually every time I've been to the States, I've met really interesting people who, many of whom have been interested and excited to show me sites, local sites, either of, indigenous Americans or battles during the Civil War or stuff. And I haven't ever said, no, I don't want to do that because your country is only a few hundred years old. I come from your country, got much more history. Why would I? That made me utter arse. I'm interested because, well, one, it's a polite thing to do, right? If you're a guest in someone's country. Two, I like learning new things. It's good to learn about new things and things that I don't know about. And three, it is genuinely interesting. Yeah, I don't understand people who are not of that mind. Okay. I'm not going to. Oh no, actually, I should do, shouldn't I? I should just do the insides of all of these whilst I am here. It's not going to take a lot to throw on some paint on these. And I haven't primed these. I'm not super worried about priming these. It's not like they're high wear areas of the model. They're going to get quite a bit of further weathering. I'm using fairly thick paint for airbrushing, so I'm getting decent coverage. Oh, there was one thing. There are fairly prominent pin ejector marks on these flaps, which I haven't as yet done anything about. So one of the things I was going to do on this was what I was trying to find last time was this Tipex. So Tipex, like Mr. Surfacer 500, is really good for filling small bits. So I'm just going to splat a bit of Tipex on these. Because it's one of the easiest filling things in the world. It dries really quickly and it sands really easily. It's really easy to do a couple of coats. So hopefully we can get that sprayed as well, just to demonstrate that. I should have done that earlier, but I completely forgot about it. Yeah, Tipex is one of those kind of secret weapon, modeler things. Because it's available everywhere. It's super cheap and it's super easy and quick to use. So, also, if you saw my build of the Airfix Sea King, it's really easy to use on Airfix instructions or any other instructions which have a white background when you're putting decals on, just to get rid of the numbers of stuff that you've already done. Which I'm feeling with this Hunter is also going to be a thing, because if you saw the last, whichever one it was, where I showed the decals and the number of decals on, oh my God, there's a lot. So yeah, working out which you've done and which you still have to do, definitely an important point. And Tipex is just so useful just for, in a very easy and quick way, just marking off what you got. Because if you scribble over them, it's not really apparent which ones you've still got to do, right? Whereas if you blot it out in white, only the ones that are remaining, kind of your eye is drawn to them. The other thing I do applaud Airfix for these is doing separate hubs on wheels. It just makes painting so much easier. Yeah, I must admit, Aaron, I've never really got the Irish American thing. It's just like, you're not Irish. It's like you might have some Irish heritage, but that doesn't make you Irish American or like Italian American for those who have a mafia background. You are just American, and as somebody else said, you're a mongrel nation, much in the way that the UK is, and many other nations, and you should be proud of that rich cultural heritage and say, oh, my ancestors were Irish. That doesn't make you Irish American. When was the last time you had any association with Ireland? I could talk about my ancestors. I think we've traced our family back to the 16th century, I think, in our family tree. I have a tenuous link to William Wallace. That doesn't make me English Scottish. I also hate the film Braveheart, so just as an FYI. Okay. Well, I did not get as much done as I imagined because I forgot how much bloody time pre-shading takes. I'm actually not very happy with the pre-shading because I did rush it at the end there. I couldn't get that mix right, but nevertheless, you know, we have a passable set of pre-shading, which again is only setting the, not even the foundation really, the prime is the foundation. This is the kind of underpinning of the start of what we're going to do with the tonal variation on the aircraft. So the fact that it's a bit rough doesn't actually matter. It's quite good in a demonstrating way, I think, for people who haven't done this sort of thing before, to have confidence that it doesn't matter if you mess it up a bit, because I've messed this up a bit. And hopefully, I mean, it remains to be seen, right? It might look bloody awful when I finished it, and then egg would be on my face. But hopefully it gives people confidence that, you know, you should go and try it because it's not that difficult. Which is, I mean, that's one of the things I wanted to achieve with the channel. You know, apart from, you know, being able to finish projects for myself, I always set out to create models that are achievable. You know, I'm not the world's greatest model. I don't profess to be exceptional. And I think, not that I decry, you know, excellent modelers. I think it's great to have that sort of inspiration, but I do feel sometimes I felt overwhelmed looking at some of those and thinking, Jesus, I'm never going to be able to produce something that good. And that's a bit disheartening because then if you've got, you know, the same model that you just seen being made amazing, and then you look at what you've done, you're just like, oh, why do I bother? Whereas I think producing something which looks okay, which looks decent, you know, with a sort of very basic skills and tools, hopefully inspires people to be like, well, I'll have a go at that because I think I can do that, you know. And it might take a bit of practice, and you know, as it does for us all. But you know, you can get there. So we have been going 2 hours, which I feel is long enough for any stream, for you guys more than me. Because obviously I can just sit and make models. That's easy. You've got to watch this stuff. Listen to me rant on about random stuff. So in terms of going overboard, I mean, it depends on what effect you want, right? And it depends on how you're going to approach the top shades. So obviously, if you're doing more subtle pre-shading, if you go heavy on your top shades, you're going to lose a lot of that. So if you're going to tone down, as you say, the pre-shading, it enables you to do lighter top layers to allow that some of that to come through. But as I said before, there's no dead ends in that. There's no correct way to do this. If you want to do very stark pre-shading, that's fine. In fact, I've even brush painted pre-shading. Maybe I should do a video on that at some point because it gives a slightly different, you know, result, but it's entirely possible. And you know, again, I think a lot of people think that these techniques are exclusively airbrush. The best modelers I've seen and have, you know, had the great luxury and privilege to learn from, often have transitioned from paint to airbrush, and then they kind of go back to paintbrush. Sorry, paintbrush to airbrush, back to paintbrush, because of the control it gives them, and they'll do a lot of like underwork with the airbrush, and then a lot of if you like fine tuning and stuff with the paintbrush. I've tried to do some of that, and it's nice when it comes off, but yeah, I just find the airbrush it's a faster tool, right? It's and yeah, that's the important thing. right? As Richard has said there, you shouldn't worry about what others do. I know it's easy to say that. Sometimes it's hard to feel it, but again, it's about being happy with your work. And if you're not happy with your work, again, as John said, if you feel you're improving doing it, it's not been a waste of time, right? So I've done some models where at the end of it, I've just thought, you know, I'm not really happy with the way, you know, I know I could have done better, but I know it's better than my last model. And if my next model is better than this model, if I learn those mistakes and from those mistakes and don't repeat them, then that's all part of the journey, right? This is a modeling journey. It is not like you don't get, I am this level model, I'm a level 4 model, and that's it. You know, it's more like D&D. See, I'm going to start with D&D and end with D&D. You can level up as you go through, you know, and everybody levels at different ways, and everybody wants to do different things with what they do, right? So don't feel and again, that's what I wanted to do with the channel. I didn't want people to feel like, oh god, I can never do that. It's just like, I'd much rather have my side not as good a result, but have people feel that, yeah, they could, you know, inspire them to try things, than just produce something that people look, wow, that's great, but I could never do that, you know, because what's the point? You know, that's a bit like, I suppose it's that English thing of, well, I don't want to show off, you know. It just feels like showing off if that's what you're doing. But anyway, thank you so much for joining me on your Sunday evening. I wish you all a fantastic week ahead. And if you are in the UK and do fancy taking a trip over to mansmodelmoments.com and perusing my store, hopefully I can get all of those kits on in the next few days, so you can see the range of other things I got. Tamiya, Mini Art, Italieri, Armor, for instance. Got a lot of Tamiya. I've got a lot of Tamiya everything, actually, which aren't on the website at the moment. Plus all of the things like the Molotov pens, these stands I'll get on, all that kind of stuff, good stuff. If you're in Europe and the US, it's a lot harder, mainly because of shipping, you know, and I don't want to put people off, I guess, by having shipping rates that are, you know, high, because I can't make a loss on the shipping, you know, because it would kill me. But I don't want to feel like I'm, you know, putting myself way over the mark, because I know you guys can get Tamiya, for instance, more readily and cheaply than we can. So I need a little bit more time to try and find some shipping solutions that make sense before I can really open up to the EU and the US market. But with any luck, I will get there. And then hopefully some of the models that you currently find difficult to get hold of, I can help you guys out with that. So that's all from me. Again, thanks very much. Have a great week, and I'll see you hopefully next time when we can put some proper paint on this rather than just spilling it all over my hands. I'm going to have to wash my hands now. Okay, guys, have a great one. Cheers now.